Wish they would do the fonts a little bit darker. I probably have to figure out how to adjust the settings. All right. All right. Looks like we are live on Facebook. Welcome, everyone. All right. So tonight we have got a great topic to talk about. We're going to talk about work and motivation and how to deal with that when you don't feel like you have the motivation to kind of put in the work to get the results that you want. And we're going to talk a little bit about the emotional side of that, where that can happen, and different things that can help you shift the motivation and everything. So you're going to want to stay tuned and listen in on this. All right. And if this is your first time joining me, welcome. My name is Tina. I am a happiness coach, and I help people that struggle with feelings of depression, anxiety, dark, possibly suicidal thoughts. I do this by sharing my experience, strength, and hope of things that I've done to help work through those emotions, to help get you through to the other side. And I give you real world practical experience of things that have actually worked for me. So, what we're going to do here tonight is we're going to talk about work. And so, before I jump into all of that, though, I may get a little bit scattered or off topic. Hey, Saeed, good to see you. Because today I was at day three of a 3 day conference with GrowthCon, 10X GrowthCon with Grant Cardone, and had some amazing speakers throughout the event. And today was no exception. I have so much going through all these nuggets, little gems, and everything. So, I may go off on a tangent once or twice, I'm sure, as I go through some of these. But one of the things that kind of came up, and I felt a need to talk about that, was the concept of work. And one of the themes that went on over and over is that you have to put in the work, right? You can't just manifest your way to it and, think your way and think positive, happy thoughts and all that kind of stuff. And no shit, Sherlock. Has there anybody been out there that realizes that things, you know, take work to do that? Are there people out there that actually think that you don't actually have to put in work to do things? Okay, good. I'm pretty sure that most people understand that you have to put in some sort of work. Sure, you might get lucky, but usually a lot of preparation or being in the right place at the right time, which other people will describe as luck, end up happening. However, and sometimes we're given a lucky break, and sometimes that's lucky, and sometimes it's not so lucky, right? You can find out things afterwards, right? But so putting in the work, it got me to thinking. I'm like, okay, I know that there's been times where I like work nonstop, and that was my corporate career. I was always doing those kind of things and always putting in the work. And even when I wasn't at my 9 to 5 job, I was always working on something else. I had some sort of side hustle, volunteering, doing all kinds of crazy stuff, working nonstop. At one point, before I actually left my corporate job, when I was doing a transition, I was actually working 3 different jobs and I was volunteering. It was crazy, but that wasn't a bad thing. So I was actually very, very happy during that time. I worked my full time 9 to 5 job, but I had been doing it for so long, it became easy, it became boring. So I was always looking for something else to do, some other way to make money. And that's typically what ended up happening for me in most of my corporate jobs. And I- like I started working full time when I was 17, and I always had more than one job. Always, 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 always. Not because it came from a sense of not feeling good enough. I just like to be doing things, right? I like to be active. I like to be useful. I like to learn new things. And so when when a job became routine, but I still liked being in that environment. I liked the people, I liked the job that I was doing. It honestly, it takes a lot to get me to hate something anyway. So, and that was before I did any recovery work, any spirituality stuff. So, um, I always did that kind of stuff. And partly it was because there wasn't like I usually had like a lower income job, but it didn't matter what job that I was making. I always kind of spent to this kind of threshold, and that kind of got me to the point where then there was some pressure that I needed to make more money. So now I needed to go get another part-time job and do something else and end up um, end up doing more things, right? And then eventually it got to the point where it's like, okay, now there's too much demand on my time, so now I would upgrade to a new job and I would go to a new company, right? So the first 10 years though, from 17 to 27, I worked at one company and stayed there. Unfortunately, so I had switched from night shift to day shift, so that was a good thing. Um, and so I was always doing work and I would always volunteer for extra work, even if it wasn't my job. So I worked in the office, in the warehouse, in the shipping office and stuff like that. And I would go and volunteer to offload hand bomb trailers and offload them on the weekends. And I would volunteer for inventory counts, anything. Like I volunteered for social club, all different kind of aspects. I was always interacting with people within uh, the company, and I did that even when I was in school. Now, some of this might have stemmed. Now that I'm just kind of talking this out, I just realized I'm like, oh, I did kind of do this in school too. So not only did I go to my classes and I did as much, although I was terrible at sports, no hand-eye coordination, no depth perception. I had a lazy eye that wasn't fixed back then. And so I was not good at sports. You did not want me on your sports team whatsoever. But I was pretty good at aerobics. And that was the thing. And I used to choreograph different aerobic workouts. And it's too bad I didn't sustain that. That would have changed things a little bit. But I was always doing that, and then I was showing other people how to do that. So, but I would also be involved with school plays, band, you know, different clubs afterwards. Whatever I could get involved with, whatever kept me away from the house the longest was the thing that made me happiest because I did not want to go home to the childhood home that I grew up in. Whatever I could do to stay extra, that I had some sort of extracurricular activity, I was most happy. I was most depressed when summertime came. All the other kids are excited. I was depressed when summertime came. I did not want to go have fun. That was bullshit. That was not safe. I wanted to, other than when I went up to my aunt's cottage, I did enjoy that. Or if I was at my aunt Sandy's, she was awesome too. Or March break. I hated March break as well. So it's funny because I realized that there is a connection around that time of year that I go through this little bit of a depression period because I did not want to stay home because I did not want the extra time at home with the abuser. And so being aware of those kind of things can make you understand. It's like when all of a sudden you're kind of like, I feel down, but I'm not sure why. What's going on? And it took me a while to kind of pick up on some of those emotional patterns of why I would feel down or depressed at certain time periods, right? And so understanding that made me realize it's like, oh, okay, once you make that connection of, because you'll be searching around trying to figure out, well, why do I have these emotions that are going on inside of me that don't really make sense or fit for what's going on. And you just feel these things and you're irritable and you're maybe irritable or sad or depressed or anxious or something like that. You can't quite put your finger on what is the problem. Where is this coming from? And when once you're able to figure out and you're able to trace that back to, oh, this was going on at this time of year, and then there's certain activities that end up happening. And I think sometimes people may have some triggers around March 13th, especially because not only was March break a challenge, but 2020 COVID was not fun either. That was a pretty scary time when the lockdowns happened for a lot of us in North America, at least. And that, like, the fears that got triggered at that time because people weren't sure what was going on. There's some unprocessed emotions around those kind of things. And I know everybody's like, oh, COVID's done, we're all good, and everything's that way. But there was a lot of fallout of different stressors that people weren't prepared for when that came up. So when COVID hit and people got locked in, well, now a lot of the emotional things that they were just keeping busy and they were too distracted to actually look at those emotional things that were going on. Now COVID hits and now you have this whole other thing of it opened up a can of worms for a bunch of people. And some people were happy with the change, some people weren't. So me being more introverted, I was cool with being locked in and didn't have to go, hey, I had a built-in social out. And so I was okay with that. I got a little too comfortable with the isolation though. So that's a downside, right? That being said, so kind of going back to um, understanding that there can be anniversaries, and I didn't want to kind of go into a whole COVID thing. So let's go back to the work piece, right? So if you find that you're stuck and you're not able to do the work, what I find is a lot of times it's not so much. First of all, ask yourself, is it you can't do the work, meaning you don't know how, you don't have the right tools, you don't have the ability to actually execute on the work? So is it you can't, or is it that you won't? And if it's not, you can't. So first, you have to go through a process of elimination. So technically, yes, you can do the work. So it's not you don't know how, it's not that you don't have the equipment, you don't have the tools, you don't have the knowledge or the understanding of what it is that you need to do. So if it's not that, that is the easy part. If it's technical or tools or anything else like that, that is like 20% of why you're putting in the work. And the problem is in a lot of work environments, what happens is everybody focuses on just that one piece. And rightly so, because in a business, as a leader, your job is to make sure your team actually has the tools they need to be able to do the job that they need to do, right? So if their system goes down and they're not able to use the system, well, getting the system back up is going to be top priority, or at least providing them an alternative method to be able to continue to do their role. But a lot of times it just stops there. And then once those tools are provided, what ends up happening is this is the piece that doesn't get factored in, is a lot of times people will either delay, procrastinate, avoid, do all kinds of different things where they're not putting in the work. And one of the things that can happen is if you've eliminated, it's not that they can't, so they've done it before, you know that they're capable of doing it, and they have the tools, they have the resources, they have everything that they need in order to be able to do the job, but for whatever reason, it's not getting done. This is an indicator, it's now on the won't side. And this doesn't, and I'm not talking about, blatant won't, like they're not deliberate, they're not actively trying to self sabotage, right? They're lacking prioritization, they're lacking understanding of what's in it for them to be able to do this. So what ends up happening is a lot of times leaders will default to the quickest method to get somebody back online, which is often more of a fear or shame based. And I've used this tactic before. It's too easy to kind of go with that. And in fact, in my younger years, that was my default method because that's what worked for me. So of course, I use fear and intimidation to get people to do things or ridicule and mock them. And until I got taught that there was a better way, and not everybody responds to that kind of motivation properly. So understanding that there's different ways. So yes, you can go for the short-term quick fix and just get it done. Do this, I said so. If you don't do this, you're going to get fired. Kind of, that's kind of like, the big extreme kind of thing. But you can't always do that, and especially in like relationships, right? Especially if you have long-term relationships, and this includes your long-term work relationships. You can't just idly go around threatening, "I'm going to fire you, I'm going to fire you." It loses its threat. It has no meaning, right? It's like a mom that's yelling at her kids all the time to tell them that, wait till your dad gets home, or, you're grounded. And it's like, yeah, whatever. I spent most of my teenage years grounded. That had no phase on me. In fact, I preferred the spanking just so that I could just get it done and over with. The getting grounded took too long. I hated that. It's like I just get grounded because I came home late, and then I'd come home and they didn't fix the fucking problem as to why I was coming home late. So they just kept punishing me for coming home late and not understanding why. Like, what was the motivation of why that I kept repeating the same mistake? And it wasn't because I didn't understand, it's because I didn't fucking want to be at home. And so it comes down to understanding the motivation, right? So yes, you can go with the quick fix, the fear. You can use crack the whip, right? You can use that method, but it's going to have a lot of diminishing returns. You're not going to, and it requires you to be there to enforce it all the time. And so it's not an effective, time efficient way. And it's definitely not a long term solution. It is a short term quick fix. And the problem is, most of the time, I see a lot of managers or leaders default to the short term fix because it takes more work to understand somebody's motivation and how to motivate them in a way that is effective for them. And this is where you can default into, I don't know if you guys have heard of like, and I've seen this done in many different ways, but like gem theory. So you have personality types. It could be like a disc assessment. It could be true colors. It could be a different, like I've seen a quite a few different ones. But so basically, and I'm going to default to the GEM one. I learned this in Dan Locke's program, High Ticket Closing. So I'm giving him credit for that, of where I learned that piece, but I just find it's the easiest one. So a Ruby type personality is somebody who is very bottom line driven. They like to win. They like the best of the best. They're very motivated by having the best top quality, right? And they're often leaders. Now, there's probably maybe 5% of the population fall into a Ruby category, right? So you're going to find a lot of people in leadership positions, high CEOs, billionaires, that kind of stuff. They have some component of them that is like a Ruby type personality. Now, these guys they're very heavily motivated by avoiding pain. So this is where that whole default of the stick comes out, cracking the whip. You crack the whip, they don't like that. So they will do whatever it takes to avoid pain because they've been through a lot of it. So they will avoid pain. What's the quickest, fastest way for me to get the best result in the shortest amount of time? That's what they look at. And if you are trying to torture them, you're going to give them the longest, softest, you know, fuzzy, crunchy granola, everybody sing kumbaya kind of, that will drive them nuts. Now, the opposite gem of them is a pearl. So they're like a peacekeeper. They're very much about, like, think of a family oriented person. They care about what's going on with everybody. They assess everybody's feelings. They want everybody to feel happy, to feel good. And yes, they like to win, but they won't win at all costs. They will stop short of, if so, have you ever seen that video online where there's a race and there's a bunch of runners and they're running, and one of the runners trips that was in the lead and they fall, and so the person that was in second place, they went and picked that person up and helped them across the finish line. So they both came in towards the last, but that's kind of like a pearl personality. It's like, I don't care about winning. I could win, they like to win, but not at the expense of other people. So those two personalities are going to clash the most in a business environment. Now, both are needed, both are valuable, both are important, right? Um, because if you're win at any cost, you've got a very shark infested kind of environment, and when there's no other prey to take out, then sharks will start to turn on themselves, and that's not a good environment to be in. So you have to balance some of that out. So you have a higher percentage of the population that is more pearl. They're more like, can we all get along? And they're very concerned about feelings, and they're much slower, methodical in their process on how they do things, whereas a ruby is very fast, right? Then you've got the other two gem personalities. So you've got like a sapphire personality. These guys are the life of the party. They dress in sparkly, eye-catching things. They got the best cars. They're like super fancy. They know how to throw a party. If you want a fun party, you want somebody who is a sapphire in charge. They are going to organize it. They will get everything done. They will have the best entertainment. Everybody will be so happy. It'll be really, really fun. You do not want these guys doing your books. Okay? They're going to be entertaining, life of the party kind of people. And this is awesome because these guys bring the joy of life. They're also very people focused. They are going to bring, like, there's nothing worse than coming to a party and they're like, back in the day when I was doing party light parties, and I would have the host, and I had to coach the host on how to make sure that there were people there. I wish I knew a little bit more about the gems then. I would have known which personality to get that host who was maybe a little bit more pearl, and they had their friends and family, but they were too shy or too timid to be able to ask their friends or family to come, right? So having that sapphire personality, they would have flooded the room and had enough people there, right? So now the opposite, the ones that the sapphires are gonna, because they like a lot of freedom, a lot of flexibility. You try to tie these guys down and they're not going to be very happy. You try to make them pay attention for too long, they're not going to be very happy. Think probably ADHD. A lot of those are in that category, and I think there's probably a lot more sapphires than there used to be, just because of technology. I think all of us have had to tap into that sapphire side of ourselves, right? Of being on social media, being more active, present, sociable, that kind of stuff. Now, you tie them down too much, and that's going to be a problem. Now, who these guys are going to clash with the most are the emeralds. The emeralds are the opposite personality type. Now, the emeralds are the ones that are like the hall monitor. They are very structured. They are like the engineer type, the accountant type. They know all the rules and regulations, and they want you to follow every single one in a methodical, logical order. Do not try to skip steps. Whereas a sapphire is going to jump all around. They're like a ping pong all over the place, right? So these two guys, obviously, you can see that they're going to clash. Now, both are absolutely needed in a business because you need people that are entertaining, that are outgoing, that are bringing new friends, new customers into the business, right? And they're out there talking to everybody about the business and all that kind of stuff. Now, they're bringing in people in the door. The bean counters, the emerald types, they're going to be the ones that are going to making sure that all the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed, and that we're not getting into any legal trouble, that we're doing things by the book, by the rules, we're staying ethical, all of that kind of stuff. So extremely valuable. But they're going to find the sapphires very annoying. The sapphires are going to find the emeralds very annoying. There's going to be conflicts that happen. And so why I bring up these four different personalities types is because there's different ways to be able to motivate those people in a way that isn't punitive, right? So if you understand what kind of personality you're dealing with, you don't have to use the crack the whip. So if you're trying to crack the whip on a sapphire, you're going to make them sit down, follow the process. Do not, they have no flexibility, no freedom. You take away all of their privileges. They're just going to lose their mind. That is extremely punishing for them. However, you could flip that around and you could focus on why they would want to, like, so sapphires, they're not going to pay attention to time too much. They're going to probably be late quite a bit, and because they get distracted and they're probably busy talking with somebody, and that's what got them taken off course. And so they're not paying attention. So in order to properly motivate that sapphire of why they want to be on time, is you have to give them something fun of why you want them there early, why it's important, like whether it's a contest or some sort of, obviously you can't do that with your day-to-day kind of thing, but you want to motivate them through something that is important to them. And you're going to do that with every one of the gems, understanding where their personality type is and how to properly motivate them to do what it is that you want them to do, without having to take out that stick and do it in a punishing way. So if you're dealing with a ruby type, you're going to focus on how they're going to win, how they're going to be the best, how only the top performers are going to show up early, of course, like blah, 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 right? That kind of stuff. So that might motivate both the sapphire and the ruby because they're kind of a little bit more along those lines, right? Now, the pearl, they're going to be more motivated by, what, you really don't want to let the team down. Everybody's going to be counting on you, and it's really important for you to be there on time and all of that kind of stuff, right? So you're going to focus on who and why it's important for other people because they're extremely other people oriented, right? And it gives them satisfaction and fulfillment to be of service to others, right? So it's important to tap into that side. Now, the emeralds, they're going to be like, they're easy, especially with time. They're all about time. They will keep, if you need somebody to keep you on time and on track for things, they're going to actually remind you that you need this amount of time to travel, and then you need this amount of time to get to the room, and we're going to leave a little bit of a buffer there. So they've got everything all mapped out. So you want, if you're not very good at staying on time with stuff, like say you're a sapphire, you actually want to partner with somebody who is an emerald type so that they are going to keep you on track. It's going to be annoying for you, but if you are appreciative and grateful for what that personality style brings to the table, then you're going to learn to get along and you can kind of meet in the middle a little bit. And that emerald type, they're going to be happier because you actually add some excitement to something that's otherwise very boring, routine, mundane, right? And even emeralds will get bored, right? So, and same thing with the rubies and pearls, right? That, you know, there's no point of winning if you don't actually have a crowd that'll cheer you on, right? So you definitely want to have pearls around to be able to cheer you on and admire you for being the best, right? So you kind of need that balance. And then also the pearls appreciate strong leaders that can take hits for them and to help guide them and direct them because they're too busy running around taking care of everybody else, right? That it helps to kind of channel that into something productive and being part of that best team. So understanding that when people are not doing the work, it's not so much that they are lazy. I really hate that because maybe that works for like a ruby or a sapphire type that they can kind of think along the lines that they're lazy. That's not going to work for an emerald or a pearl type personality because they are actually not. In fact, they probably have to be a little bit more selfish in their nature to balance themselves out a little bit, where they're more serving. They're more like the servant type, and the other ones are much more of the outspoken, driven kind of type. So um, for them, it could be something that, like, a example, a pearl. If they know that they need to do something, but they have two people that they support and it's now conflicting, that's going to cause some confusion for them. That's going to cause some uncertainty about now they don't know who, like only one of the jobs can get done, but and they can't decide which person they're going to disappoint. And so it could be something that they're too afraid to speak up or try and get it reprioritized or something like that. So they may delay, they may avoid that, or if they know that somebody's going to be upset about something, they may delay or avoid, right? So understanding the personalities and understanding their motivations is important to try to decipher why they are not actually putting in the work. Um, Sapphire, it might be because they find it boring, it's repetitious, it's like, I did that already, I don't want to do that again, I'd rather go do this other thing, right? Or they may need to have the work broken up for them, or they may need to have certain things that they're better at focusing on that, right? And tapping into their strengths rather than making them do a bunch of things that are not their strengths. Same thing with emeralds. Um, you want to make sure that if if it's throwing a party or if it is trying to get people engaged and active and excited, you don't want the emeralds in charge of doing that. It's not going to be a fun time. Okay, they might think it's fun, but everybody else will be like, this is kind of dry, and they might think it's amazing, right? And then the ruby types, they're going to be much more motivated by, you know, how can this get us further? How can this put us in a better position? How can this allow us to be the best of the best, right? How can this get us to win more championships? How can this get us to win more deals? Whatever it is, right? They're going to be much more motivated with that. And if um, they're on too much of where they can't compete, that's going to be a problem for them, right? So if you're forcing them to have to play nice for too long of a period, that's going to be a problem. They're going to get irritated, they're going to get snippy, all that kind of stuff because they need challenge, right? So if they're sitting around having to, listen to everybody and be patient and listen to everybody's voice, it's going to drive them absolutely freaking mental. Okay? And so you have to be aware of where you're going to have potential conflicts and then how to properly motivate them, because if you're forcing somebody who's like a Ruby to always have to be patient and get along and that they don't have um, any avenue for them to actually go to battle. These guys are your warriors, right? And if they don't have a place where they can actually fight a little and not be chastised for it, then they're going to start causing little problems within the organization just because they have this need within them. They need to go to war, they need to go to battle. And I used to recognize this in some of the environments that I was working in. And I called them the pit bulls of the company, right? So what I would do, because I was a little bit more on the pearl side, is I would actually harness these pit bulls and I would give them battles to go fight. I'd be like, hey, this team isn't getting us our numbers for this and we really need it and this is the problem it's causing. And they would be all over it like stink on a skunk. They would just like go, oh yeah, I'll go fight that for you. And I'd be like, yeah, this is awesome. Because now I didn't have to fight. I didn't have to be the bad guy. I just had to learn how to harness the pit bulls and I knew how to command them and how to get them to do what it is that I needed them to do. And so that was a very effective method for me to be able to um, tap into a leadership role, give them what it is they needed, which was the challenge and the battle, and then I would praise them heavily for it when they came back, and they liked that. So I learned how to deal with and motivate people based on their personality type. Um, Now, I tend to be a little bit more pearl. I can actually switch between all of the gems actually very well. And I think that's probably because the environment I worked in for most of the time, I was always in a Ruby type situation where highly competitive, worked for the number one grocery retailer for like a long time. And so very high level, strong companies that I worked for. One of the smaller companies did like 5 billion a year, right? So, and the other ones are up in the double digit billions. So that was kind of the normal, right? So very strong companies. So very high Ruby kind of personality for the company culture. Now, I also went through a whole company culture shift of trying to get these rubies to adapt to um, a new way, a softer, like rounding out some of the edges, right? So they didn't have so many sharp edges, so there wasn't so much blood all over the place because it was challenging. So we had to kind of redirect and harness their energy in an appropriate way to be able to give them what they needed so that they could thrive in that environment, but also do it in a way so that the other people in the company could also step into stronger leadership positions, because just because rubies tend to be that stronger, more dominant one, they're not the only leaders and they're not always the best leaders. They're the best probably at execution, at actually achieving a certain result. But as far as a people manager, maybe not your best choice. Okay, so if you have a larger team, maybe not the best choice. You may want to go with somebody that's more emerald or maybe somebody more sapphire, like on those kind of levels, or even a pearl, depending on the nature of the actual role, right? So a pearl, so like me, it's funny, when I tested, I'm actually 50% ruby, 50% pearl. But I can also pivot, so you can pivot right or left on those. So I can pivot more to the sapphire thing because I've got that people connection, and I can also pivot to that emerald side where I did like accounting type stuff and SOPs and really structured stuff. Now, it took quite a bit of focus. Once I actually got into it, then I could really focus and get that done. And I was really very methodical and structured with it. But I often, the ones that I can't blend too well are the Ruby Pearl. I'm either in that challenger mode or I am in that softer, let's all get along kind of mode, right? So it's it's a little bit of a balance, and I guess as I've aged a little bit, I've learned to bring all of those pieces together, and I think that's where the diamond is formed, and that is where you can embrace and reflect back all of the gem colors, and you can pivot as needed. And when you're able to do that, you're a bit like a chameleon, right? So it is uh, very good ways of being able to deal with different emotions of different people and understanding their motivations as to why they do the work that they do. And when you are able to tap into that, then you can properly motivate people without having to use that stick method or to default to fear, blame, shame, ridicule, mocking, all that kind of stuff. That stuff works really, really well for a Ruby type because it's kind of like the locker room jock kind of thing, right? Of like where you kind of banter back and forth and tease each other, going, "Oh, I bet you can't do that," and as the other one's like, "Hey, hold my beer, let's go," right? It's that kind of bro mentality, and it doesn't always. It's not the most effective tool, considering that rubies are only like 5% of the population. There's 95% of others. So this is why it's important to shift to a little bit more of understanding method and motivation so that people can actually tap into um, getting the work done. And how do you convince a Ruby to actually buy into that, especially if they're the ones in charge and they're the leader and they're like, no, just do this. This is quicker. We don't have time for this touchy feely bullshit. At the end of the day, that Ruby, they want results. They want the best team, the best performing team. And if you can show them that this is actually more effective, you will gain their buy-in. And you will show them that they now don't have to constantly be there to use that stick to keep everybody in line, because that frustrates them if they have to constantly be the person motivating the rest of the team. That doesn't work for them. No, you guys are supposed to be fucking cheering for me. I'm out here leading. That's how it's supposed to go, right? That's a Ruby's motivation. So, yes, they can be caring and compassionate and all of that kind of stuff, but they have a time limit on it before they're like, okay, enough of this bullshit. Let's get back to work, right? Let's get back to driving the business forward. Let's get back to our numbers are down. I don't have time to talk about this, right? And that kind of stuff will come up. So just know that if you have anybody on your team that is not putting in the work, I really want you to try and assess where do you think they are in terms of motivation, and then also working to align the objective, the result that you're trying to get with their personality style of why it would be important for them to achieve that result, and align the goals of the organization with why it's important for them to do that and how they could see that they would actually shine in this particular area in a way that is valuable to them, right? So trying to convince somebody who's a pearl type that it's like, yeah, well, you're going to be the best, you're going to be number one, that's not going to motivate them. And it's like, you know what, we're all going to win. You know what, the whole team is going to win if you can actually achieve this result. And I've done some pretty extraordinary stuff for that I would never do for myself, that I knew if we achieved this goal together, that the entire team would win. And I went above and beyond, friggin' pulled out all kinds of stops, probably crossed a couple of lines. So I wasn't so goody two shoes when it came to the fact of knowing that the rest of the team was going to win. and that they were going to get something that they highly valued. And the funny thing is although I was able to achieve it and execute it, I didn't care about the prize. Everybody else did. So it's funny. So I jumped in, I pulled out all the stops to get that done. Why? Because it was now about the group and what they were going to benefit. Hey, these cats. So, um, yeah, so that it kind of made me realize that please don't look at people when they're not putting in the work. There's emotions behind it that are preventing them from doing the thing, and it's a matter of making sure that the outcome is aligned with something that they actually value, the what is in it for them. And that is a very basic change management strategy that it has to be used across the board. And the funny thing is, I see this happen so many times, especially in sales environments. You guys know how to friggin' do this when it comes to closing the deal on the customer. Easy peasy, you'll do that all day long. You bring that in-house. Well, now this is internal, so everybody should just do it this way, right? No, it's the same friggin' process. Closing is everywhere. It is important in everything that you do, whether it's a personal relationship or a professional relationship. And closing isn't about forcing somebody to see your way of thinking. That's dictatorship. That's not what we're talking about here. Closing is actually showing somebody, here are the options, and this is why you would want to probably do this, and let's help you make that decision, and being on the same side as them. And it's not about strong arming somebody into it or using fear and intimidation. So I know damn well that you guys have these skills, so fucking use them in what you're doing in every aspect of where you're doing it, right? So, and I am speaking that way because I'm speaking to a particular audience that will actually understand this. And I know that you guys don't have the time for this emotion stuff. But if you spend a little bit of time in this, the 95% of your team that is not operated and wired like you will actually step up and actually perform better, therefore saving you more time. And if you have more people on your team performing better, you will win. And that's what the Ruby wants. So, guys, I know this doesn't really kind of seem to tie in, but everything that I do with the stuff that I teach and I coach on, it all has to do with change management and being able to manage these emotions. And if you do not manage these emotions properly, that's where the depression, the anxiety, the suicidal thoughts, or people leaving your company or people leaving a relationship, they all come from, because those emotions are not being properly managed. And the thing is the closer people are to us, the harder it is for us to see our part. It's much easier to see our part with a stranger or having a fresh set of eyes come in to take a look at things. And if that person, especially, they maybe understand your perspective, but maybe don't operate from your perspective, but you trust their opinion enough to be able to give you an assessment in a way that doesn't belittle what it is that you bring to the table. So, example, like, the emerald with the sapphire, right? That emerald has to appreciate that energy, that stuff that an emerald would find extremely draining if they had to spend 8 hours a day trying to talk to people all day, when they're like, no, just give me some spreadsheets. I want to go analyze this data. I don't want to talk to a bunch of people. That's annoying, right? And the sapphires are kind of like, no, I don't want to sit here looking at a spreadsheet all day. I want to be out on the floor. I want to look good. I want to talk to people. I want to, have fun and do that kind of stuff. They could do that all day long, right? So understanding what people bring to the table, how to value them, how to motivate them from those kind of perspectives. And guys, these are just generalizations. Please know that everybody, you're not no one person is in one particular box. All of us have the ability to pivot through the gems. And if you put, say, four gem type personalities in a room together and say they're all pearl, well, guess what? Those other roles will need to be filled, and somebody's going to have to shift a little bit more to a sapphire type personality. Somebody's going to have to shift to a ruby type personality. Somebody's going to have to shift to an emerald type personality, because the best teams have a balance of the gems. And they, now, that doesn't mean a one for one balance, but a balance based on the ratios of the work that you need. So if you have a lot more administrative tasks, you might need more emeralds and pearls in your organization. Now, if you're a sales organization, you're going to need a lot more rubies and sapphire type things, but you're going to need those pearls and emeralds to facilitate the back end, right? So understanding this kind of stuff is really important at being able to um, shift people into accepting change and being able to understand what is going to motivate them to change, to be able to get the work done, to get the end result, right? When you can understand those kind of things, all of us can win together, right? So that is the important piece. And everybody is happier when they're communicated in a way that is effective for them, that you actually understand how they operate and what's important to them, and you know how to talk to them in a way that's important to them. So guys, I hope you found that helpful. If this is your first time joining in, I do upload my videos to my YouTube channel, which is Coach Tina B 125. I'd love it if you would go over to my channel, tap on there, subscribe, and then you'll get notifications when I've uploaded the videos. And hopefully you found this helpful. If there's any questions or things that you would like me to cover in training, please let me know, and I'd be happy to cover that for you guys. All right, so hopefully we will see you again tomorrow. Take care. Have a great night. Bye.